Alrighty then, so I'm back and it's been just a little bit of time, but not too much. And as you can see, the water has dried from this paper, so it is perfectly flat. And that's why we had the tape all the way around it. Okay, so now the next thing I wanted to show you was my water. You see, I have not cleaned the water since I made the painting, and you can see it's pretty clear. You don't have to pollute your water very much. Remember, just when you clean your water off, just a little dip and then onto the paper towel. Also, remember the paints. Don't mix in here because you'll make the paints all ooky. Gosh, especially the yellow, but really all of them. You mix in the tray over here. That's what it's for. And when you get the box of paints, you're going to get it nice and clean, hopefully, right? So you should leave it nice and clean. Cleaning up is just not a big deal. As you can see, a little bit of water in here, a little bit of paper towel, right? And it cleans right up, no problem. Do that for all these guys here and here. Okay, good enough. And you see how easy it was to leave it nice and clean for the next person. Okay, now let's do it for realsies here. Okay, so here you can see I've got my drawing that I've made and I've got it taped all the way around here. Remember, tape in parallel, so both sides, top and bottom, either way. Okay, and so then I think what I'll do, thinking about the colors that I'm going to do here, should I do it kind of like a sunset or should I do it like a blue sky? I think a sunset would be kind of more fun. I mean, I think maybe a blue sky would be easier, but I'll just go with the sunset. So I'm thinking about like what colors would work and everything. But in the meantime, here you go. I've got my little wash brush right here. Just any big old soft brush will do. And I'm going to paint this whole thing with a bit of water. Okay, I'm not scrubbing the water in, and I don't need to go over it multiple times or anything. You know, because this isn't watercolor paint, and so, you know, this paper is not totally strong, right? And I don't want to smear my drawing out of existence either. But that was it. Just a little bit of water to get it all sort of wet. Then what I would do is I would start with the colors. Here, I'm just going to put this water up here. Okay. The color that is the lightest. Okay, so I'm going to put my tray right over here. Let's see. Right there. Right there. Good enough. We can see everything. Okay. So anyhow, yes, so my lightest color is what I'm going to start with. So I think I'll go ahead and I'm going to take a little bit of yellow. So my brush is clean. I'm going to go into the yellow, get it nice and wet, and make an area on my tray for yellow. Okay, that's good enough to start. And so I'm going to make a sunset. Let's start with yellow here. And if I get some yellow into the hills, I don't think that's a big deal because the hills would probably maybe be greens or browns or blacks. Any and all of those colors are darker than yellow. If I get a little bit of yellow into the building, I'm not worried about that either. Okay, so I've got a little bit of that yellow into there. Beautiful. I think I'm even going to use my wash brush just to spread that out a little bit. Cool. And since my water is going to be reflecting my sky, I'm going to go ahead and get some yellow in there. Now I know you might be thinking, wait a minute, but isn't water blue? Okay, here's another thing that you got to think about with painting is you got to get rid of that psychology. Oh, I know. I know. It's so hard because we have these images in our minds, these sort of rules that we set up in our minds. Okay, this should still be nice and clean. So, okay, more yellow. That says that this is, grass is green, sky is blue, et cetera, right? And I think it's not going to hurt anything to get a little bit of yellow into here. Jesus, yellow everywhere, right? Okay. Okay, a little bit in here. Just everywhere, everywhere. It's not going to hurt anything. Anything that I want to stay white, though, I'll want to avoid getting color in because the white is as white as it's going to get. I think that this dock could definitely be yellow, but I think I'll leave underneath the wood of the dock. Maybe I'll make the flotations blue. Maybe I'll do something different with the colors of the boat. So I'll purposely not get those yellow. Now the house, if I was going to make the house white, let's say, that's cool. But I think even a little bit of yellow into there wouldn't be such a bad thing because, it's going to be working and reflecting a little bit of the light that is all around. So a little bit of color into the house, not too much. And as it dries, things will become a little bit lighter. That's okay. And my pencil's smearing a little bit, but that's okay. See, we've drawn with a soft pencil. And so, that's why it's nice and dark, but it's also going to smear a little bit, whatever. If we were doing a watercolor painting, like for real, like this is what we're doing a straight up watercolor, we would probably use a hard lead pencil. And we haven't talked about leads and stuff like that much, but just know that they come in, light or soft and mediums and hards. And so they do different things anyways. But here we go. Here I'm just going to take a little bit of this orange color here to use as a transition. Start working that into the sky. Well, let's get more orange than that. And I've got a nice clean brush that I'm working that in. Okay, and you'll notice other than the wash brush, I've only used one brush so far. I was saying that before that the kids, they tend to use like way too many brushes. Well, I don't even know if they use them. They get them. And then, they sit around and they get them dirty and I don't know how much they actually use them. I tend to just use very few brushes, maybe oftentimes just one. Maybe it's because I'm lazy or maybe it's because I'm just wanting to build dexterity with that one brush and seeing how much I can do with just that. So that's pretty cool. I think that I want a little bit less orange here. And while it's still all nice and wet, I could probably take a little bit of paper towel and just take some of that color out. I'll take my wash brush that just had clear water on it. Okay, a bit there. And my paper is starting to get a little bit stressed here because it's not watercolor paper, it's just drawing paper. So I'm going to want to probably back off on that sky area. Oops, got a little bit of orange into my red. And not get it much wetter. We'll let it dry. Okay, but just a little bit more red first before I do that. So here's a little red. Maybe make a little red area down here. Okay, get a little bit of red into that. Cool. And then I'll be letting that, it will just kind of meld together and I'm going to let it dry and that's as wet as I can get it. In the ceramics class, I often talk about building a relationship with the clay because you really have to think about how far you can stretch it. But it's also kind of true when you're painting, especially with the surface, whatever it is, the surface that you're working with, the paints that you're working with, how far can you stretch them to do whatever it is that you want them to do before they fail? And here, for instance, if I get this paper any wetter, it's not going to be a good thing, right? Especially up here. That's okay, I'll work it a little bit lower. So maybe into those hills, I'll stick with that red there and make it darker red in the corners, right? Starts off darker and it's going to get a little bit lighter as it goes up. Nice soft brush. See how it's getting lighter? Maybe even get rid of some of the red down here. Let it get a little bit lighter as it goes up. And we'll work in layers too, because I probably won't do this all in one shot. I'll probably let it dry at a certain point and then come back into it and add details or add more color, that kind of thing. And maybe just with the little bit that's still on my brush, maybe I'll come back and do this really distant thing. Because the atmospheric perspective, we want to make things sort of disappear off into the distance. So I want this to be lighter, and I could work these guys perhaps a little bit darker. But let's get the water a little bit while this is still a little bit wet. So a little bit more, maybe the orange right here. My brush was pretty clean. Okay, and we'll work a little bit of that orange into here, that water into the yellow. And those rocks eventually be some kind of grays or something, so I'm not worried about getting them wet. The only things that I'm protecting are these boats because I thought, well, maybe I'll try and make them maybe a little bit different color just to change things up. And who knows, maybe I'll change my mind and bring them back to being just oranges or yellows or reds. But for now, I'm going to keep them separate so that way I have at least the option. Okay, and then a little bit down here. And blend this in here a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. Just like before, maybe I'll take my wash brush right here, and I'm going to make sure it's a little bit clean. It's got a little bit of water on it, not too much, not too much. And just add a little bit of water into there, just blend it. I'm not scrubbing on that paper because this is not watercolor paper. Maybe I'll take off a little bit of water from that. Okay. I just squeezed out a little bit of water there. That way it's not too much. And just a little bit of this color here. Just pat up into here. Just to blend that a little bit. Okay, cool. And that's good. Don't need to go any more than that. So maybe down here, a little bit more red. And that's nice where it's still wet up here. You can really just blend in so nicely to that orange. Okay. Okay, now let me see on the house. Let's do this. Let's get just a little bit of the other color into that. So I'll start in my darkest area over here. This is where the shadow would be, wouldn't it? So I'll start in that dark area. There's a white house. At least I want it to read as a white house. But I still want to put some color in it because it's got all this beautiful color from here. Put a little bit of color into it. Not too much. Not too much. Okay. A little bit of color up here. Okay. Make that roof a little bit darker. And if some of the color blurs into other parts, I'm pretty cool with that, me personally, because for me that's the magic of watercolor, is how it kind of does its own thing. Okay, let's see, and so some of the darkest shadows would be on the underside of that roof. So stuff towards the the back side of it here. Oh, maybe up in the corners. Remember from the last drawing how you can see up in the corners and everything of a place. That's where it tends to be a little bit darker. Okay. Cool. Good enough. Good enough. And where else? So I think like in here, I'll start working with some of these rocks a little bit. You're like, whoa, red rocks. Geez, Mr. Kuhn, everything you're doing is just all red. Well, you'll see. Because remember, I'm going to mix these colors a little bit. The watercolor paints are what you call transparent color. And working with transparent color and working with opaque color, in other words, colors that are solid, are a little bit different. A little bit different thing going on. And so when I work with an opaque color, a color that's solid, then what I would do is I would probably be mixing a lot of the colors, either pre-hand in my palette, on my palette, or mixing them on canvas, but mixing them both together while they're still wet. With these transparent colors, what I'll end up doing a lot is putting one color on top of another color, and so as the light goes through, it will make your secondary colors and all the different colors, tertiary colors. So you know your tertiary colors, that's like the third iteration of color, if that makes sense. So if you had your primary colors, those are your first colors, your red and your yellow and your blue, and then your secondary colors would be your orange and your green and your purple. You know, those are the colors that you mixed when you mixed your red, yellow, and blue. And then your tertiary colors would be the third one. It'd be like, you know, the yellow green and the orangey sort of red, or the more crimson sort of purple, that kind of thing. Those were your tertiary colors. Maybe even in here a little bit. And if a little bit of that gets into the water, you see I'm going outside my rock, that's okay. It sets up for a little reflection. Maybe a little darker underneath this boat here too. Oh, don't you worry, I'm not going to leave it totally red. And any other place, maybe a few places that I just make a little bit darker than others. You know, remember that whole thing, making it darker towards the top and the bottom. You can see the top's darker. And I'm working on the bottom here a little bit, little by little. Because the more red I put now, whatever color I mix with it is going to have more reds to it. Okay, let's see, maybe a little bit on that dock, because I want that dock to just be a brown. So I'm going to mix a little bit of that red into here. Okay, ooh, it's kind of pretty already. Okay. And cool. So far the colors that I've mixed have all been what you called harmonious colors. Some people call them analogous colors, right? Colors that are next to each other on the color wheel, right? Yeah, harmonious colors, things that don't make, you know, grays and browns, right? They only make pure colors. So yellow and red next to each other on the color wheel, they can only make various reds and yellows and oranges, right? Okay, but by adding an opposite color into it, those we call complementary colors. And so that's where you're starting to get, well, you know, your browns and whatnot. So let's see what happens. Let's mix up some blue, because we've used yellow and we've used red. We haven't used blue yet. So I've cleaned off my brush, and I'm setting up a little puddle of blue for myself. Let's just see what happens. Okay. So we know that right now this is mostly red, so if I mix in blue, it should make mostly kind of, well, purple, right? That's not bad. Let's give that a try and see what happens. So I'm working in my darkest area first because that's the safest area to work in. Hard to screw that up. Okay, maybe a little bit of dark here as well. Okay. And as the brush is just getting a little bit drier, a little bit less color, I'll just work towards the top. Maybe stubbling that paintbrush. You see how I'm not just giving it a stroke, but a little bit of pat? That's just giving it a little bit more texture. A lot of that might just blend out as the paint just melts together. But one of the things that makes painting more powerful than drawing, in other words, painting with a brush versus drawing with a pencil, is that, well, you know how I told you that the mechanical pencil has only one tip? It's got just the tip, and that's it. But a wooden pencil gives you the tip, the edge, and the wood. Well, a paintbrush gives you even more. You've got the tips, you've got the edges, you've got all different kinds of paintbrushes. There's just an infinite amount of things you can do with it. And one thing is you can get this sort of instant texture with it. Okay, so now that my brush is getting really, really light, I think a little bit here, but not too much. Not too much with this hill in the background. That's it. A little bit, not much. Okay. All right, cool. And I'll let that dry before I go into it anymore. Okay. So let's see. How about we'll go over here with these rocky areas. And remember, if I want any of it to stay white, I want to just leave that white alone. Don't get anything into it. And you notice here, I'm just patting, pat, 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 not even stroking it. Of course, you know, you'll find your own way with patting and stroking and doing whatever with the paintbrush. That's kind of where the fun is for me. That's where you'll find out what your style is. Well, notice this. You see, if I want to get something really close to the edge, I'll use the tips of the brush like this, the flat part of the brush right here. See how I get it right up to it? And that way I can get a really, really straight line with that. Hopefully you're noticing as I blend the blue over different colors, we're getting a little bit different colors. So here, this was pure red, so we're getting nice purples. Here, I had more yellow and red, making more of an orange, and you'll see that I'm getting more of a brown tone out of it. honestly a little bit on the gray side, but I'm kind of good with that, you know, with the way that the light is and everything. Now, where I have the yellow, when I put the blue over top of it, it should be a little bit more on the green side. Let's see. And when I first paint it, it might seem a little bit more, well, let's see, it might seem a little darker than what it's going to turn out when it dries. But you can see, yes, it's a bit more on the green, more in the purples, more in the browns, just depending on what was underneath it. And it's all just a combination of those primary colors, red, yellow, and green. Theoretically, every color, every combination of colors should be able to be made with just those three, theoretically. In the end, it's kind of probably pretty nice to have some pre-mixed secondary colors. Sure, why not? But we'll get into color theory later. Maybe one of these boats is blue. That'll be a nice contrast. All right, here we go. And let's see, maybe we'll make the other boat more of a yellow color. So, or maybe more of a green color. Yeah, more of a green. So get some of that yellow into there. Oopsie, a little bit into my dock, but that won't hurt. Okay, and a little bit of the blue over that yellow right away. And it's going to get me a little bit more green. Okay, I think at this point I'd probably just let this painting dry a little bit, because once again, since this is not watercolor paper, I've got to be a little bit gentle with it. You know, because you can see here, especially in the top where I got a lot of water into it, how it got kind of stressed. Okay, so good enough for now. I'm going to let this dry a little bit, and then we'll continue this.